All right, let's talk about the psychology of persuasion. We're going to dive into those hidden forces, those little psychological triggers that make us say yes, sometimes even when we shouldn't, and more importantly, how to know when we really mean it. You know that feeling, right? You've just agreed to something, and a few minutes later, you're just standing there wondering, why did I do that? Why on earth did I say yes to that? It feels like a weird glitch in your brain, doesn't it? Well, what's fascinating is that it's not a glitch at all. It's actually a feature. And believe me, some people know exactly which buttons to push to activate it.
So, to really get a handle on this, let's start with a kind of bizarre but totally true story. It all went down in a little jewelry store in Arizona, and it perfectly shows just how strange our brains can be when we have to make a decision.
Okay, so picture this. The store owner has a bunch of beautiful turquoise jewelry, but for some reason, it's just not selling. It's just sitting there gathering dust. She's getting super frustrated, and right before she leaves for a trip, she scribbles a note for her staff basically saying, you know what, just price the stuff at half off. I just want it gone.
But here's where it gets interesting. The employee couldn't really read the owner's messy handwriting. So instead of seeing ×1/2, she thought it said ×2. And so she went and doubled the price of every single piece. I mean, this should have been a complete disaster, right? The stuff wasn't selling at the original price, so doubling it? That's just crazy.
And yet, the exact opposite happened. The entire collection, the same stuff that nobody wanted, sold out almost immediately. It was gone in a couple of days. So the big question is, what on earth happened here? Why would people suddenly stampede to buy something they'd been ignoring for weeks, all because the price went up? It makes no sense. Well, the answer all comes down to a simple mental shortcut. You see, the customers were mostly tourists on vacation. They didn't know a thing about turquoise jewelry. So, their brains fell back on a really common rule of thumb we all use. Expensive equals good. That higher price tag acted like a switch, a trigger for quality. All of a sudden, that ignored jewelry looked super valuable and desirable.
So this whole expensive equals good thing, it's not just a one-off. It's actually a perfect example of a much bigger pattern of behavior. And scientists, particularly those who study animals, have a name for these kinds of automatic, almost robotic responses. And guess what? We humans have them too.
The scientific term is a fixed action pattern, but I love the name that psychologist Robert Cialdini came up with. Click-whir. It's so good. The click is the trigger, like that high price tag. And the whir, that's the sound of the pre-programmed tape in our brains starting to roll, playing out an automatic response without us even thinking about it. Like, whir, I should buy this. And you see this kind of thing all over the animal kingdom. A classic example, the mother turkey.
So, mother turkeys are generally great moms, but their whole mothering instinct is triggered by one and only one thing, the cheep cheep sound their little chicks make. If a chick goes cheep cheep, she'll take care of it. If it's silent, she might completely ignore it or even worse, attack it. It gets crazier. Scientists did this experiment where they took a stuffed polecat, which is a turkey's mortal enemy, and put a little recorder inside it that played that cheep cheep sound. And what did the mother turkey do? She embraced it. She tried to mother her sworn enemy. It's a perfect example. Click, the cheep cheep sound, whir, the mothering instinct kicks in.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a turkey, but we're not like that. Well, we kinda are. We have our own cheep cheep triggers. There was this famous study by psychologist Ellen Langer where a researcher tried to cut in line at a Xerox machine. When she just asked, "Excuse me, may I use the Xerox machine?" about 60% of people said yes. But when she added the word because, "May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush?" compliance jumped to over 90%. And here's the kicker. It didn't even matter what the reason was. She could say, because I have to make some copies, which, duh, that's what a copy machine is for, and people still said yes. The word because was the trigger. It was the human cheep cheep. Click, whir.
Look, most of the time, these automatic responses are actually super helpful. They're mental shortcuts that save us a ton of time and brain power. But they also have a dark side. They make us vulnerable. And there are people out there, let's call them compliance professionals, salespeople, marketers, fundraisers, who have made it their business to know exactly how to trigger our autopilot. And one of the most powerful triggers they use is the rule of reciprocity.
This rule is wired deep inside pretty much all of us. It's this powerful social rule that says we have to try and repay what another person gives us. If someone does you a favor, you feel like you owe them one. It's the glue that holds societies together. But that feeling of being indebted, that feeling of obligation, it can be exploited.
big time.
A classic example. Remember the Hare Krishna members who used to be in airports all the time? They were masters of this. They wouldn't just walk up and ask you for a donation. No. First, they'd give you something, a flower, a book, whatever. It was a gift. And if you tried to say, oh, no thanks, and give it back, they'd refuse. They'd say, no, it's our gift to you. And just like that, boom, they've created an uninvited debt. Now you feel obligated. And only then, after you're feeling that weight of obligation, do they ask for a donation. It's a brilliant and kind of sneaky tactic that makes it incredibly hard to just say no and walk away.
Okay, let's talk about another massive trigger. It's our tendency to look at what other people are doing to figure out how we should behave. This is especially true when we're feeling uncertain. It's called the principle of social proof. And most of the time, it's a good guide. You know, if everyone's running out of a building, you should probably run too. But sometimes this principle can have absolutely chilling consequences.
38. Just let that number sink in for a second. 38. That's the number of good, law-abiding people in Queens, New York, who watched from the safety of their apartments as a woman named Catherine Genovese was attacked and murdered in the street below. For over half an hour, 38 people watched, and not a single one of them picked up the phone to call the police until it was way too late. The whole country was in shock, just asking one question: how? How could 38 people see that and do absolutely nothing?
Well, when psychologists studied it, they found a really disturbing answer. It wasn't that those 38 people were monsters. The problem was that there were 38 of them. It's called the bystander effect. Think about the uncertainty of that situation. From their windows, they're thinking, is that a real attack? Or is it just a couple fighting? Has somebody else already called 911? So what do? They look out their windows to see what their neighbors are doing. And when they see that nobody else is acting, nobody is panicking, they take that as a cue. The group silently agrees, this must not be a real emergency. The personal responsibility gets spread so thin across the crowd that it basically evaporates. And so nobody acts.
Now, understanding this gives us an incredibly powerful tool to fight it. If you are ever in an emergency and need help, do not just scream, "Somebody help me." That's the worst thing you can do. Instead, you have to cut through the uncertainty. Pick one person out of the crowd, point directly at them, make eye contact, and give a specific, clear command. You, in the blue jacket, I need you to call 911 right now. The second you do that, you shattered the diffusion of responsibility. You've turned a confused bystander into an active first responder.
So, okay, we've got these incredibly powerful built-in triggers like reciprocity and social proof. And look, they can be used for good, absolutely. But as we've seen, they can also be used against us. So the big question is, how do we protect ourselves from this stuff without turning into, a cynical hermit who distrusts everyone and refuses every kind gesture?
The answer isn't to just throw out all the rules of society. That would be a pretty lonely way to live. The real key is awareness. It's about learning to pay attention to what's going on inside you. When you're in one of these situations and you feel that sudden gut punch of obligation or that frantic, panicked feeling that you have to decide right now, that right there, that's your alarm bell going off.
The strategy is simple, but it takes practice. You have to train yourself to just pause the moment you feel that emotional rush. Just take a breath. And in that pause, do one simple mental trick. Separate the person asking from the thing they're asking for. Sure, you might feel like you owe that salesperson something because they gave you a free sample. But is the product they're selling actually any good? Is it worth the price? The moment you mentally relabel their gift as a sales tactic, you break the spell. You neutralize that feeling of obligation, and you can look at the deal for what it really is.
And if you need one more tool, here is an incredibly powerful question that just cuts right through all the noise. Anytime you feel pressured or trapped or just unsure, stop and ask yourself this one simple thing. Knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, would I make the same choice? That first, immediate flash of feeling you get, that's your gut talking. And it will tell you everything you need to know about whether you were just played by a tactic or if the choice was genuinely the right one for you.
At the end of the day, our brains have these shortcuts for a reason. They help us get through a ridiculously complex world. They really aren't bugs, they're features. But by understanding how they work, how they can be triggered, we can make sure that we are the ones in the driver's seat of our own minds. So the next time you feel that little automatic pull to say yes, that click whir in your head, what will you do?